Let's do that again. Take two. This is your live look at the astrology Mercury retrograde version, and today is March 31st through April 6th, 2025. So sorry for that. I had to restart my computer, and apparently my streaming software just says I'm still streaming. So here we go. Let's do this again. So every week we gather live to look at the astrology, and you hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%, because astrology is time, it's energy, it's the energy of time, it's how we live time. And boy, oh boy, we are in a new time. Because if you recall from last week, we had a solar eclipse in Aries. So this solar eclipse is, of course, it's a couple of days behind us, but in reality, it is with us for the next 6 months. Solar eclipses, they set the stage, they mark a starting point, but sort of the curiosity and even like the magic, so to speak, of eclipses is that we were feeling this eclipse before the eclipse. This eclipse that we had in Aries was the last eclipse in a series of eclipses that began way back in April of 2023. Feels like another lifetime at that point, or at this point. But this eclipse, even though it's the last of the series, it really takes us into a new space for the next 6 months. So it planted a seed, and that seed certainly is still with us this week. And so we'll touch a little bit on these eclipses, because we will come up to what's called the first quarter moon this week. This first quarter moon is the first sort of big checkpoint after our solar eclipse. Sorry, so I have so many windows reopening because I restarted my computer. But if you're watching live, do say hello. Is this thing on? Tap, tap, tap. But anyway, the other big news is that we have Neptune now in Aries. Maybe you'll just blame Neptune. But before we go into this week's astrology, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Katie Sweetman, and every week we got live, and hopefully the internet is working. And you hear me say it every week, the astrology is 50%, and you are the other 50%. So as I said, we are coming off of eclipse season. This is taking us not only into the next 6 months, but this is taking us over the next 4 weeks and even beyond. Aries season is about action, new beginnings, forward movement, planting seeds. Sometimes these are seeds that we do not see right away. Aries as an energy and an archetype. It's, again, astrology is time. And so with Aries, we begin things, we take action, we move forward. And it's something that for all of us, of course, we are our own people, but you have your own relationship with taking action. You have your own relationship with moving forward. So sort of the question to plant the seed, no pun intended, is where are you taking action? What are the seeds are you planting? What new initiatives do you want to put in movement? Because we are in a container of time, so to speak, a setting of time that is very much influenced by Aries. Aries isn't just the first sign. The zodiac, I said earlier, it's ruled by Mars. Mars, this planet that talks about power and drive and individuality. In astrology, there are what are called, look, somebody's watching, the broadcast is working. Thank you. But Aries is what's called a cardinal sign. The cardinal signs align with the 4 directions. And this is an important point, although a technical point, because these 4 directions are the 4 seasons. They are the 4 directions of life, and they are the 4 pillars of life. Aries as a sign and an archetype reminds us that we need to find our own 2 feet. You want something, you have to go and get it. Maybe that sounds a little bit confrontational, but that energy is about really finding our desire. What do we want? What are we going to go after? What are we going to go get? And the thing with Mars is that it's not Venus. It's not going to necessarily come from anybody else. So we need to find our initiative, we need to find our drive, we need to find our power over the next not just 4 weeks, but also the next 6 months. If Mars, if the Aries is ruled by Mars, it means the eclipse is ruled by Mars, and it's driving the energy this season over to Mars in Cancer, because Mars has been in Cancer since January 6th. If you recall, Mars was retrograde. This was a retrograde that took us from December all the way to the end of February. And this was a period for us to rework our Mars, especially with the opposition to Pluto. This is an opposition that really is marking the first chapter of 2025. There are 3 main chapters, 3 main acts in 2025. The first act goes from the beginning of the year, really it's before, but the beginning of the year all the way to the end of May. Second act, June, July, and August. Third act is the rest of the year. So our first act is really through this lens of Mars retrograde. Now Mars is direct, Mars is opposite Pluto. And with this last opposition that we will have at the end of April, it's to remind us all that we still have to face our Mars. We have to look at our Mars. What do you mean face my Mars? Look at my Mars. We all have our own deep relationship with power and drive and action, inaction, fear, insecurities. And Pluto talks about the looking in the mirror, the need to reform and transform. Pluto is something called an evolutionary planet. It is something I will come back to because we've got, I think I mentioned too many windows were opening at the same time as my computer rebooted. We have Neptune now in Aries, also an evolutionary planet. So this is a period of time, not just March and April, but also the next 6 months to refine our individuality, refine our power, refine our drive, refine our motivation. And then with the energy of Mars pointing over towards Cancer, because Mars is in Cancer right now, Cancer is also a cardinal sign. And cardinal signs talk about, again, the 4 pillars of life, the 4 things that really set and hold up our life. The energy of this eclipse really points towards home and family. I realize Cancer is a lot of different things. It's not just home, it's not just family, but it really represents our ability to put down roots, to feel supported, to feel safe and secure, to whether it's our household, whether it's literally our home environment, or home as a figurative word or sense. And over the next 6 months, we may be asking ourselves, where is home and who is home? Where do I want to plant myself? How do I shore up my foundation? Do I need to make a change in my home? What's the role of family in my life? Obviously, these are often questions that have a lot of complicated answers, a lot of complicated past experiences, but Mars will, sort of pick at it even more so because Mars has been square Chiron. Chiron really talks about something that we need to heal, a knot that needs to be undone. So that energy is still with us this week. And as we get to the first quarter moon, this will be going into the weekend. We have our first checkpoint after the eclipse. So energy, I've said this before, it sounds a little bit esoteric, but the energy of time manifests in a square. You see that with the lunar cycle, new moon, quarter moon, full moon, last quarter moon, and then the new moon begins the cycle all over again. And so we look to see throughout the next 4 weeks where things are manifesting around those 4 points with the energy of the eclipse. Then we get into a larger square of time within the 6 months, and we will get to that 3 months after the eclipse, which will be June, 3 months before the next round of eclipses, so June into the beginning of July, and that will be another time to look at. So how are we all doing? My internet got weird. They got eclipsed, starting things out. Let me know where you're watching from. And for those that don't know where I am, I'm presently in the rolling hills of Maryland. And so it's daytime. I realize the clocks now have shifted both on my side of the earth, but also even in Europe and beyond as well. So Let's talk about Neptune. Seems like a very Neptune broadcast. Let's talk about Neptune in Aries. So I was talking a few moments ago about Pluto, and I mentioned this comment that Pluto is an evolutionary planet. In astrology, we have what are called 3 evolutionary planets. These are planets that were not known to the ancients. You have to understand that astrology is at least 5,000 years old. But let's say the planet Uranus, it was not discovered until 1781. Neptune wasn't discovered, I think, until 1842, 3, 6. Can't remember. And Pluto was discovered more recently, quote unquote, 100 years ago, and this would have been in 1930 or 31. I always forget. Of course, there are other planets that have been discovered. You know, you're like, what? There are other planets that have been discovered? Yes, there are other planets in our solar systems, but they are newer addition to astrology, and I don't feel that I'm anywhere near not capable, but I haven't really sat and integrated and felt into what these new archetypes are, because that's what they are. They're a new archetype for the collective. So something like Aries, which was discovered 20 years ago, like, it seems like because of the archetype, we have this energy of discord and things are a little bit chaotic, but there has to be something that's the higher expression of Aries. But I don't know yet. It's only been used for the last 20 years in astrology. Anyway, so we have Neptune now in Aries. So right after that solar eclipse on March 29th, Neptune went into Aries on March 30th. To put it into context, Neptune has not been in Aries since 1875. It was in Aries last from 1861 to 1875. Yes, you heard me correctly. So that is a long time ago. Neptune in Aries is actually a part, and I've been talking about this since the end of last year, how 2025 has some really interesting astrology, namely the outer planets all changing signs. If you count Pluto, and I realize Pluto changed signs in November of 2024, but if you scooch it into 2025, we have Pluto now in a new sign, we have Neptune now in a new sign. Saturn will go into Aries at the end of May, and then Uranus will go into Gemini on July 7th. That's kind of a big deal. It's like looking at a clock. This is a cosmic clock, and it's not just a collective clock, but it's a clock for our lives. And now we have all these different hands changing signs. And in some cases, like Pluto hadn't changed signs in 15, 16 years. Neptune has not changed signs since 2011, 2012. I know, a long time ago. Saturn is a little bit more run-of-the-mill. It changes signs every 3 years, but Uranus doesn't change signs for every 7 years. So we haven't had Uranus change signs since 2018 and 2019. So let's go back to Neptune. Evolutionary planets exist outside the bounds of Saturn. Saturn was the last planet known to the ancients, meaning I would have looked up in the sky, and still to this day, I look up into the sky, and the farthest planet that I can see is Saturn. Yes, there are certain conditions where you can see Uranus, but by and large, the last planet that we can see by the visible eye is Saturn. Saturn and its rings of time represent the borders and the boundaries of our physical and manifested world. Everything happens within this container. You want to talk about the square? There's Saturn. And we have the 4 Saturn points, the conjunction, the square, the opposition, the closing square, the Saturn return, to give us a much bigger scale of time. Kind of getting a little bit technical here today. Neptune, it works differently than Uranus and Pluto. But what's Uranus? Uranus is this archetype of Prometheus. It's awakenings. It's transformation. It's things that break us free from the bounds of Saturn, of time and karma. Neptune works on a level to transcend. It could be a planet of healing. The evolution comes through healing. It also talks about this need to sublimate something, to make it sublime, to take a suffering and to transmute it into something beautiful. It can be unconditional love in its highest of its high. I feel like every time I talk about Neptune, well, I have Neptune rising. I don't know if you all know that. I have Neptune rising. I have Mercury and Mars conjunct Neptune on the 12th. But so, when I talk about Neptune, there is some personal experience, but also it's how I've observed it with other people. All the evolutionary planets work to transcend the ego, transcend the self. The self and the ego is within the bounds of Saturn, within our material and manifested world. So when we go through a Uranus transit, it could be the Uranus opposition age 42, 43, 44. We go through a Pluto transit. Talk to your Capricorns. They know what you're talking about. Talk to your Aquariuses. It means that there's something that we need to go beyond ourselves. And in order to do that, if it's Uranus, we need to break free from the past. We need to break free of anything that's not truly us. That's why people go through the quote-unquote midlife crisis in their 40s, but that's another topic for another time. With Pluto, it is the need to look at the shadow self, the deep self, the hidden self, and in some cases, the self that is pushed away and not acknowledged and projected onto other people. That's why if you have a Pluto transit, there can be a deep emotional and spiritual alchemy and work of transformation that's done. Both, or rather, your Pluto really works on a soul, quote-unquote, level. I'd say more at a level of that sort of Akashic level, cause and effect level. Uranus works on an emotional level, but Neptune works kind of like the moon. It's very atmospheric. You can't pin it down. Neptune dissolves the boundaries between our physical plane and our non-physical plane. And up until, say, the 1840s, when Neptune was discovered, when an outer planet is discovered, that archetype comes into the collective. We see that with Uranus in the 1780s, a time of revolution, a time of change. And Neptune, photography, spiritualism, this idea that we were beginning to go beyond our physical and manifested world. Neptune is the planet of mystics, of seers, of oracles, of psychics, of mediums, but it also can bring us into the depths of our being, into our quote-unquote abyss. So when we have an evolutionary planet that makes a transit in our own personal astrology, it doesn't mean that one day we wake up better people. It doesn't mean that it makes everything okay. All we have to do is look back at Neptune in Pisces 2011, 2012, all the way up to 2025 and even 2026. There has been a deep work with our Neptune. We've needed to look at Pisces. We've needed to look at illusion. We needed to pull back the veil. We've at the same time needed to keep our feet firmly on the ground. That hasn't always been easy. So what will Neptune and Aries mean? I'm not sure. We can't use history per se as a reference point, because the consciousness of the 1860s and 70s is not the consciousness of 2025 and 6, even though it feels like we're regressing sometimes. But this energy, it says that wherever Aries is in your astrology, will undergo a transformation, will undergo a need to look at what is there so it can either be healed, transcended, sublimated. And the lens for Neptune for the next 14 years will be Aries, the I, the individual, our ability to take action, our ability to lead, our ability to go after what we want. But Neptune opens us up to the universal. If you dissolve the boundaries between our physical plane and our non-physical plane, what remains? Well, we will have to see. So this is where Neptune can really open us up on a very deep and spiritual level. And I'm saying this in a very grounded way, of course. So I'm not saying do something where you lose your anchor point with Neptune. Do not drink your Neptune, for example. But if we keep that strong grounding to the physical, and Mars really is a physical planet, it talks about our physical power, our vitality, our drive, but it's now going to be through the lens of Neptune. Even though Aries is about the I and the self, now we need to sort of open that up to something beyond the I and the self. Can we use personal power? Can we use the I and the individual towards something greater? I'm a realist, even though I have a South Node in Pisces. Maybe that's my Saturn conjunct my North Node, but how do we open up to the higher ideals of Neptune, but at the same time, keeping our feet on planet Earth? We will see. So when we go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, it's to sort of get a little bit of a glimmer, because that's the thing about Neptune, is you can't feel it, you can't touch it, you can't rationalize it. It shows up atmospherically, it feels like a shift in the vibe, it talks about dreams, it talks about illusions, and you can't really quantify that, for example. So we will begin to feel into what Neptune and Aries may mean for us. How do we work with this energy? What do we sense is beginning to shift in that part of our life? What is our relationship with Mars? What is our relationship with power and drive and individuality? Do we think beyond ourselves? Do we feel beyond ourselves, for example? These are questions that the answers are particular and specific to you. But again, it is the start of something. And anytime a planet crosses into Aries, because Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, it brings us into something new. It initiates a new cycle. And so over the next 14 years, Mars will move the energy of Neptune around the zodiac. Mars has a 2-year cycle. Neptune has a 165-year cycle. Two very different time scales. But it's intriguing, and it's part, again, of this larger change of the astrology as we go into 2020, the rest of 2025, and even into 2026. Because Neptune goes into Aries until October. I should have the date in my head, and then it leaves, it goes back into Pisces, and then by April 2026 it is back in Aries, where it will be for the next 13 years. So what is, I guess, is more rhetorical, of course, like, what is your relationship with Neptune? Where is Neptune in your own astrology? If you're watching, very likely you have Neptune in Sagittarius. You're born in the 1970s into the beginning 1980s. Or maybe you have Neptune in Scorpio. You're born in the 1960s, in the late 1950s. You've got Neptune in Capricorn. You're born in the 80s and 90s. Maybe you even have Neptune Aquarius. You're much younger. But wherever Neptune is, and I remember when I was learning about astrology, the older books kept saying it's a transpersonal planet. I'm like, what does that mean? Yes, it is transpersonal in the sense that it's beyond ourselves. But the way that it would present the information was like, oh, you shouldn't pay attention to this. It just works on such a bigger scale. But wherever Neptune is in that part of your chart, sign and house, that area of your life, you are working to sublimate, to transcend, to transform, to find compassion, to open up to a higher calling. Because wherever Neptune is, that area is a spiritual work. This is what I've noticed over the years. And when something is a spiritual work, it goes beyond the rational. It goes beyond what we think, how things should work out. It's something that we really have to work through wherever our Neptune is and open up to a higher potential. So let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs and begin to feel into where this Neptune energy may play a role over the next 13, 14 years. I know, 13, 14 years. So let's start with Aries. Aries. So Mars is your planet, and we just had a solar eclipse in Aries. So this is a dynamic time to be an Aries. This time is really talking about action and new initiatives and new beginnings and things kind of happening. And maybe things kind of happening, technical term, is in your home environment. A lot of Aries are going to see changes in their home environment. It could be a move. It could be somebody moves in, someone moves out. It could be family related. It could be the birth of a child. But you will have to see how that's relevant to you. With this eclipse, of course, that will take you over the next 6 months, but here comes Neptune. Neptune's kind of sneaking into Aries right behind this eclipse. Neptune, I've said this in the introduction, is very atmospheric. It sort of rolls in with the tide. You didn't wake up on Sunday and be like, oh, Neptune's in Aries. I totally feel it. But maybe you perceive it in a way that feels like the music has changed. Or maybe you're like, Katie, I don't feel it at all. I feel that Neptune is something that needs to be felt into. It is something where there's a shift, but that shift is not immediately visible or present. It's going to be a little bit different if you are an Aries rising versus an Aries sun. The sun is so much about the I, the self, the ego. You will begin a 13, 14-year process. I know, 13, 14 years where you are working to transcend the self, to go beyond the self. Now that it's Neptune, now the heavens are opening and it's pouring outside. So this could mean that your sense of who you thought you were on an ego level now needs to go beyond that. Who are you? And you open that up to a universal level. For their Aries rising, Neptune's now in the first house. And so this is a time where you're really working to find your power, find your desire, to start something new, but start something new through the lens of Neptune. You may not even notice Neptune, but when you look back over the coming years, you may see Neptune at work. Neptune has very different desires than your average planet. My joke about Neptune is that it doesn't care if you're the most powerful person in the world. It doesn't care if you make $1 million. First, it has to feed your soul. And with that in mind, even though the first is not about money, if you're Aries rising, it sort of gets into these bigger questions. What's truly of meaning and purpose to you? What new things do you want to initiate in your life that actually support greater meaning and purpose? How do you go beyond yourself? And how do you take your power, your actions, and put them towards the greater good? Question mark, question mark. Obviously, these questions do not have answers right now, nor do they have simple answers, but it's something to begin to sit with. Taurus. So Venus, so much retrograde happening right now between the weather, between my computer, between the internet, but anyway. Taurus. So Venus is your planet, and Venus is currently in Pisces. It's wrapping up its time, it's retrograde. Retrograde has been since March 1st. And now we have some Neptune to add to the broadcast. I don't know if you can hear that. So Venus, it will be retrograde until April 12th. Right now, it's in a sign that it loves to be in. It loves Pisces. It's in the sign of exaltation. This is a Venus that's beginning to open you up to the role of friends and community in your life, to really see beyond this world, to maybe volunteer, to get involved in social issues and social causes. Venus, because you are Taurus, Venus always asks what's truly of value, what's really important, because Venus is a planet of investment. With Taurus, it's monetary investment, it's material investment. But when Venus is in Pisces, the investment is beauty, it's ethereal, and it's spiritual. And so this is a retrograde for you to sort of come back to this question of what are you investing your life in? Venus is meeting up with the North Node this week. This is a week where you get a little bit of eclipse energy, and maybe to see, where is there a turning point this week? What are the changes? Maybe this eclipse energy is going back to that question I asked, like, what are you really truly investing in your life? Venus, when it turns direct on April 12th, is going to do so around the North Node, but also Saturn. In fact, next week, we'll talk about this next week, Venus will make a conjunction to Saturn. Saturn energy is very black and white, ironically, because we're talking about Pisces, and Pisces is so subjective, ethereal, it's feelings based, but Saturn still says you need to make some commitments, you need to put things in order, you need to put things in their place. We'll come back to this. That said, Neptune has now come into something called your 12th. You have not lived to have Neptune in your 12th sign. And this comes on the heels of an eclipse in your 12th. And it says that for the next 6 months, the 12th, which is spirituality, letting go, coming to the end of a cycle, is going to be one of the major focuses of your life. Neptune adds a little bit of a different energy because Neptune pulls back the veil. Neptune says that you are going into a much bigger cycle where it is to go beyond this world. I realize I cannot make that concrete for you. That's the thing about the 12th, is that the 12th needs to be revealed. It cannot be, you cannot go into the 12th. The 12th is that moment where we're falling into sleep, and that moment where we're beginning to wake up and we're in a different world. One of the ways in which we experience the 12th on a day-to-day basis. But the question that doesn't have an answer to plant the seed, Taurus, is what is beyond this world? What is opening up to you? Where do you feel the calling? And where do you even feel the calling to serve and to give back? Because this might be something in which Neptune is beginning to open up for you. Gemini. Gemini, so Mercury is your planet, and Mercury is still retrograde, but Mercury will be turning direct on April 7th, so just right around the corner. Mercury, it snuck back into Pisces at the time of the solar eclipse, so it kind of got a little bit overshadowed, but now the energy of Gemini season, or Gemini sun, is pointing back towards Pisces. It's your career, it's the title after your name, it's your duties and your responsibilities. And so this is a time for you to retrace your steps in something. This could be something on a public level, this could be something on a professional level, but Mercury is sort of making a dance around Saturn. So going into April, the bar is set higher for you. Saturn demands more accountability, Saturn demands commitment, Saturn demands that a line is drawn. Having said that, we go into the energy of this eclipse that we just had, which is in something called your 11th sign. Community, society, your friends, your social circles, social issues, and social causes. That is the domain of the 11th. And now Neptune is in there, which means that you have wrapped up almost 13, 14 years of Neptune in your career sign. That's much bigger to unpack, and honestly, it's going to be person by person, because the story that you have lived in your professional life over the last 13 years is uniquely yours. It's uniquely to your path and to your journey. Neptune in the 11th, Neptune in the 11th begins to open up this new chapter that may reshape, reframe, dissolve, sensitize, and open up your relationship with the collective. How do you want to help? How do you want to heal? How do you want to give back? Neptune, in its highest of its highs, is a planet of altruism. It wants to do something for the greater good. And in order to get to the highest of the high, we need to sometimes look at the lowest of the low within us, the part of us that doesn't want to give back, the part of us that doesn't want to help humanity. And that's part of all the work that we will need to do, at least if you're a Gemini, over the next coming years. Cancer. Cancer, so the moon is your planet, and this week we are coming off of a solar eclipse. So Cancer, you typically feel the energies of the moon more strongly, and certainly a solar eclipse is a very strong influence. So it sort of reverberates throughout the week. Then this week, the moon is moving from Taurus. We start the week with the moon in Taurus, and it goes all the way to Leo at the end of the week. So Taurus for you is your third sign of Taurus is your 11th sign. It's about community, social issues, friends. Into the middle of the week, the moon in Gemini, it's about something called your 12th, coming to the end of a cycle, letting go, rest. And then when the moon is in Cancer by, let's say, Friday and Saturday, it's about new beginnings. It's about the resetting of the cycle. But it's also the first quarter moon after a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse put the spotlight on your career. It says over the next 6 months, there may be changes in your professional life, changes in your career, but these are changes that are part of a story that has taken you throughout past October, past April, and even into October and April of 2023. Neptune has just gone into Aries, and Aries is your career sign. What will this mean? Every person, every Cancer rising will live Neptune and Aries in their own way, because Neptune is specific to you and specific to the path of your soul. But Neptune, which is a planet that dissolves, erodes, sensitizes, is going into a place that is typically about your power, your public-facing image. It's about your career, your ambitions. And Neptune just has a different desire. It has, in its highest of its high, it has a desire to be of service and to be altruistic. In its lowest of the lows, it can distort, it can warp. So it is to see how your relationship with power and authority begins to shift over the coming years. The lens of Neptune may begin to direct you in different directions. For example, Leo, the sun is your planet, and the sun is presently in Aries. Aries is a fellow fire sign, just like you, and Aries is something called your 9th sign. The 9th sign is a place where we get to share what we believe in, what we stand for. Perhaps you have a lot of opinions, but it is also a space for you to light the torch. That's the beauty of fire. It shows the way. And so this is a season for you to step into a role or to share the path in sort of the best possible way. We just had a solar eclipse in this space, so maybe you're thinking big ideas, big philosophies, big points of view, and how do you get it out there? For some Leos, this is about higher education. It could be about travel and exploration, but it is, in general, a very philosophical time for Leo. You have to really sort of think about things on a much bigger and broader scale. And it is to find answers. And sometimes in order to find those answers, we need to go back to school, or we need to get on a plane and go to a different part of the world, or we need to sometimes read everything that we can read. Neptune has just left your 8th, where you are doing a very deep emotional and spiritual work over the last 13 years, and now is moving to the 9th. Kind of like this will be when Saturn goes into Aries on May 24th. You're entering a period of your life where the question is, after everything that you've been through, Leo, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? The next few years, especially with Saturn in the 9th, these are Leos that may publish something, they might start a podcast, they might write a book, they might do public speaking, they might do a TED Talk. But it's to really share your vision, to share your point of view, and to use it as a way to positively motivate, rally, and inspire people. What's after Leo? Virgo. Virgo. See, I'm like totally in retrograde right now. Mercury is in Pisces right now. So Mercury has returned to Pisces as of last weekend. It sort of snuck back into Pisces right around the solar eclipse. So you would have been, like, I forgot that Mercury went into Pisces last weekend. But that said, the energy of your planet is now pointing towards relationships. Relationships are both relationships, both your important relationships, your primary relationships, but also how you interact and socialize with people. This is bringing you back to a story that has been with you since Mercury went into Pisces in the first place. I can't remember what date that was, but that was probably sometime in the beginning of March, if not in February. It is about relationships in general. Do not forget, and I'm sure you haven't, that Saturn is in Pisces, and Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023. Every Virgo rising has lived this time differently, but it's been a time for you to take relationships seriously, whether it is to form relationships, whether it is to clear people out of your life, whether it is to really work to make new connections in your life and to look really more deeply at how you interact and socialize with people. Virgos typically are givers, and sometimes you give a lot, and Saturn is saying to Virgo, for some Virgos, don't forget to put things in balance. Don't forget to take care of yourself as you are taking care of other people. Neptune was in this space for 13 years. It's really hard to say what that has meant on a sort of a boilerplate level for every Virgo, because it's been different. But I think if you're Virgo sun, it's just something that I've noticed is that Virgo is so used to being in control, that my choke is out of Virgo is like a secret Scorpio, that Neptune's time in Pisces has been about a decade of Virgo needing to learn to sort of transform their relationship with control. I don't want to say not be in control, but Neptune can pull at us like a current. And so I feel like I've had different conversations with different Virgo risings, especially my Virgo suns, over the past decade as working with clients, where it's been around this topic. How do you go beyond this need to be completely in control? And even though Neptune has moved on, Neptune will return to this space in October, if I'm remembering correctly. Neptune is now in something called your 8th sign. The 8th sign is a water space, kind of like where Neptune likes to do its work. And so what begins, and this again, it's going to be unique for every Virgo rising, because you all have your own lived history, but you could say it's the start of a deep healing. You could say it's a need to open up to more intimate and vulnerable spaces within. If Virgo is used to being in control, part of that is coming from a place of emotional protection. And here comes Neptune. Neptune can be a catalyst, but it typically does it on a very quiet level. It's, again, these are just things to begin to feel into. We won't know cognitively and rationally what Neptune and Aries will mean, but we will see perhaps that there is the beginning of an emotional shift that will take you over the next decade plus. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and Venus has just gone back into Pisces, and it's beginning to wrap up its time in retrograde. So the retrograde is 40 days in total, and so this is from March 1st all the way to April 12th. Venus in Pisces for you, Libra, is something called your health and wellness sign. And for some Libras, it's literally a time to take a second look at your health and your wellness, meaning how you take care of yourself, how you feed yourself, how you organize your day, and even how you show up. Venus also for some Libras could mean a need to re-look at operations in your life. What's operations? How do you organize your day-to-day life? Maybe things are a bit need to be different, for example. Venus also will be making something called a conjunction to Saturn next week. It meets up with the North Node this week, so we get a bump and a ripple of eclipse energy. This eclipse energy could talk about service, your service to other people. It could talk about relationships and sort of the balance of power in relationships. And for some Libras, it's a need to heal and to let something go. Saturn draws a boundary, Saturn puts something into reality, and Venus, after its retrograde, will make a final conjunction to Saturn. I think that's on like the 18th or so of April. That said, we just had a solar eclipse in Aries, and the solar eclipse says that over the next 6 months, relationships are a major point of priority, whether that is your personal relationships, your current relationships, or a need to bring new people in. This is not your first eclipse in this part of the chart. You've had eclipses in your relationship sign, even going back to 2023. But this is really just 2023 and into the beginning of 5, because you won't have eclipses in this part of your chart for another 9 years. So we got some time. But whatever has been in the background since 2023, and I'm jumping ahead, and I think I said this last week, Saturn will go into this space in the end of May. And Saturn will begin to make things real, make things concrete. It will need to set boundaries to say yes, to say no around relationships. And it may even talk about a different phase and setting in a current relationship. Now Neptune is in this space. It's hard to say what Neptune will mean, because it will be unique to each of the each person listening, each Libra rising. It is about your relationship with relationships. How do you show up? Do you lose yourself? Do you give all of yourself, or do you keep and retain who you are? How do you allow other people into your life? Do they just completely roll over you or not? Neptune can talk about boundaries, it can talk about borders and those who cross it, but it can also talk about the need to heal and to let something go. This is just to plant a seed. This is just to feel into the transit, because we have way more time with Neptune, but Neptune works in the intermediary plane. It dissolves things. It sensitizes things. And so when you look back, you may see that something is beginning to shift and change in relationship starting in 2025. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and Mars is still in Cancer. So it's in something called your 9th sign. And this has been a time since the beginning of the year for you to figure out, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? Some Scorpios, they're writing a book, they're starting a podcast, they're really sharing their beliefs. For some Scorpios could be about faith, higher education, and even foreign travel or long distance travel, because this is a time for Scorpio to see the world and to broaden its horizons. That said, we just had an eclipse in Aries, and Aries is something called your 6th sign. The 6th sign is the most real world part of our astrology. We get up, we brush our teeth, we eat our vegetables, we go to work, we do the laundry, and you're like, that doesn't sound like fun, but it is the things that we do in order to create order and structure in our day-to-day life. If we didn't brush our teeth, if we didn't eat our vegetables, we would see it on our physical body and our physical lives. That said, we just had Neptune go into Aries. So Neptune is now occupying a space that is very real world, except Neptune is not a real world planet. Of course, it's a real planet, but Neptune dissolves the boundaries between our physical plane and our non-physical plane. It's hard to say what this is going to be for each Scorpio rising, because you will live it differently. Neptune, for some Scorpios, you may begin the shift in your relationship with your physical body. You have lived completely divorced from your physical body, but Neptune is going to start to help you to become more aware of your physical body. For some Scorpios, it's a need to bring meaning and purpose to your day-to-day lives, to bring ritual, to really connect the most basic parts of your life to something sublime and even spiritual. For some Scorpios, it's about a higher calling. It's about service and even helping other people. But it's to feel into this transit. Scorpio likes to be in control. Aries, as the 6th sign, shows that Scorpio is typically hardworking and likes a lot of structure and a lot of organization. And here comes Neptune. I think this has been one of the harder things about Scorpio's astrology over the last 6 years. Yes, 6 years, because Scorpio had Uranus opposite their sun and their rising sign for the last 6 years. And so Scorpio's relationship with control, or the life that they had 6 years ago, may look very different than it does right now. So this is just more of a sign that Scorpio is in the midst of learning to go with the flow. Sagittarius. Sagittarius. So Jupiter's your planet, and Jupiter is beginning to come to the end of its time in Gemini, your relationship sign, on June 9th, which, believe it or not, is right around the corner because it is going to be April, like tomorrow. June 9th is when Jupiter goes into Cancer. And Cancer is a different sign, where, yeah, as Jupiter in Gemini is about relationships, Jupiter in Cancer is about intimacy, trust, vulnerability. For some Sagittarius, it's about a time of looking at money and income and finance and assets. And for some Sagittarius, it's even debt. But Jupiter does love to be in Cancer. It's in the sign of its exaltation. So it gives us the power, the inspiration to go into these very deep emotional spaces within ourselves. Relationships are just relationships unless they have intimacy and vulnerability. And so this will bring the narrative of relationships into the space of what's called the 8th sign. That said, we just had a solar eclipse in Aries, and Aries is something called your 5th sign. The 5th sign is play, creativity. It's the sign of really coming back to who you are and doing the things that light you up and give you joy. For example, over the next 6 months, you need to prioritize you, your creativity, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and more importantly, to prioritize the things that light you up and give you joy. You've had a lot of strong Saturn transits, and Saturn often is not joy. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of structure, it's a lot of showing up on time, at least that's the idea. And so with the energy of the eclipse, it's like, in the midst of all of this, don't forget about you. Don't forget about the things that light you up and give you joy. Here comes Neptune, and Neptune will be in your 5th sign for the better part of 14 years. What is it going to mean for you? I don't know. Your own transit with Neptune in your 5th will be specific to you. That's how the evolutionary planets work. They are evolving something that's specific to your life and your path. Neptune will transform who you are. It doesn't mean that you magically become a different person, but you can awaken, you can open up to the best version of yourself. But it means often where we have to look within and look at the parts where we have been denying ourselves. Just talk to a Scorpio. Scorpio went through this transit over the last 13 years, and it's been a lot of work of transformation for Scorpio. It will make you more creative. It may make you more creative. It may make you want to express yourself differently, but it's to start to feel how this is showing up into your life, and you may not even notice it, but in hindsight, you likely will. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn is actually beginning to come to the end of its time in Pisces. And so a lot of this focus for the last 2.5 years has been on voice communication. It's been education. It's been taking classes. It's been writing. It's been speaking, both literally but also metaphorically. Where is your voice, Capricorn? How are you using your voice? And also on a deeper level, what are the choices that you're making? When Saturn goes into Aries on May 24th, it goes into the base and bottom of your astrology. It turns the attention towards home and family, roots and foundation, at least for the next June, July, and August, but back again in February 2026. It is the start of a major part of your astrology, and one where family and home will need a lot of attention. You may be starting a family, you may be moving, you may be purchasing a home, but the roots and the seeds of that time, which has not yet happened, has been wild. We've been having eclipses in Aries the past couple of years. We had an eclipse on April 20th of 2023. We had an eclipse in April 8th of 2024, and we just had an eclipse here on March. It's my doggy. We just had an eclipse here in March of 29th of 2025. And so those are the seeds for new beginnings that Saturn then makes real, especially June and July and August of this year. Neptune going to Aries means that Neptune is also going into the base and foundation of your life. There is this other lens to your experiences, especially when Saturn gets into Aries and gets back into Aries in February of 2026. You will be in the same place as Neptune. Mind you, that's been the case in 2024 and 5. But your Neptune works on a very different level than Saturn. Neptune dissolves, Saturn concretizes. Neptune sensitizes, Saturn can be very black and white, very rational and analytical. They will both have to work together, but it may mean that you begin a process of healing something or transcending something that has its roots with home and family and even childhood. Aquarius. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn is still in Pisces, but it's beginning to wrap up its time in Pisces, and on May 24th, it will go into Aries. That is like a day for you to circle. It doesn't mean your life is going to be different. Everything is going to change. But it is the start of something new in your personal astrology. June, July, and August is Saturn in Aries. Aries is something called your third sign, voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. For some Aries, the next year plus and even into 2028 will be a time to prioritize education, taking more classes, learning new things. For some Aries, for some Aquariuses, it is to teach the class. Or it is to write something, speak something, because this is a space that is both about education, but also about communication as well. Having said that, you just had a solar eclipse in this space. So whatever has been happening around writing, speaking, and communicating, and curiosity and choice for the past 2 years will begin to become real and concrete, or at least more real and more concrete as you go into June and July and August. Now Neptune is going into this space, and Neptune has not been in this space in your lifetime, but it may mean that's the thing, it will be depending on who you are, because you all have your own lived experience, you will live this time in your own way. So Neptune's time in the third may mean for one person it's a time of finding your voice and transcending something that has maybe gotten in the way of you expressing who you are. For another Aquarius, it's a need to tap into your intuition, to sort of go beyond that very stereotypical rational and analytical side of Aquarius, Mercury retrograde, brains in retrograde, and begin to open up to something that is not rational, that's not analytical, that is more feeling and emotional based. For some Aquariuses, this is transforming your relationship with writing and speaking and communicating. It is to feel into it. You're likely not going to see Neptune right away, but it's going to be a presence in your voice and your communication and the choices that you make over the next coming years. Pisces. So really interesting time in Pisces is astrology, whether you are Pisces sun or Pisces rising. Why? Because we are having eclipses in Virgo Pisces throughout 2025. So it says it's just a very dynamic time in your life. Things are happening. Saturn is still in Pisces. Saturn will begin to wrap up its time in Pisces. May 24th, it goes into Aries. It returns to Pisces September 1st, and it's out of Pisces for the next 30 years, yes, on February 14th of 2026. This has been a time for Pisces to really stand on its own 2 feet. I know I've been saying that the past 2 years, but your relationship with that statement and the reality of that statement has changed and transformed the more that you have worked on yourself, the more that you have stepped into a role of duty and responsibility. We just had a solar eclipse in Aries. Aries is your second sign: money, income, material stability, and security. And so this could be a time where you are looking at your spending, you're thinking about the value of things, you want to make more investments, you want to look at property and assets. The second is both our material world, like the money that we have, the money that we spend, but it's also this broader sense of really feeling secure and stable in our material life. There was an eclipse here, April 20th, 2023. Another eclipse here, April 8th of 2024. This is the last eclipse for another 9 years. But take note of whatever the narrative has been around money and income the past couple, even self-worth and value the past couple of years, because Saturn will come into this space on May 24th, and Saturn will start to make things real and concrete. It will change the tone. Here's the other thing. Neptune is now in this space, and Neptune has a very different needs and wants compared to Saturn, because Neptune, when Neptune gets into the money sign, or Neptune even gets into a career sign, this is the example that I give. Neptune is like, I don't care if it makes you $1 million. I don't care if it makes you the most powerful person in the world. First, it has to feed your soul. So there is not only a shift on the horizon and a shift that is happening around money and income, but it's getting into a tone shift, a philosophical shift, a spiritual shift. It's not enough. Of course, we're humans. We need a roof over our head. We need to make sure there's material stability and security. But for what? And Neptune may begin to ask, although very subtly and very quietly, these bigger questions around money, income, material stability, and security over the coming years. So that is your look at the astrology of this week. Sorry, I don't know why I'm in retrograde. And the astrology is in retrograde. The astrology of March 31st through April 6, 2025. Almost at 2019. Good Lord. Eclipse season. Like, we just had a solar eclipse. So the energy is literally like this. I don't know what you're feeling. I'm very sensitive. I have Neptune rising, but maybe you feel things differently. So having said that, thank you all for joining me this week. You can watch me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Spotify. You can also book a consultation with me. You all are my clients. I promise I will not be in retrograde. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.